Ah, yes, the vaccine's almost here for COVID-19, and hopefully it'll work just perfectly. But hey, don't get comfortable too long because today's writers put us in a world that has COVID-23, and we are not recovering so well from that virus. Howdy. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, today I'm very happy to have with us co-writer Simon Boys and co-writer-director Adam Mason to chat about their latest film, Songbird. And that's right, it is technically a pandemic film. What is so interesting about it, this world of COVID-23 that they project 4 years into our future, it's a worse virus than we're dealing with now. And while some people might be really tired out of the virus, meaning basically everybody on the planet, what's interesting about this movie is it reimagines a world of even harsher conditions than what we currently have. And of interesting and fascinating note, this film was filmed in Los Angeles during the pandemic in June of 2020. And, you know, Adam was kind of at the forefront of doing a production successfully in COVID and working with the unions to keep his crew and his cast safe. And he did. They pulled it off. They didn't actually end up with a case. And, you know, there's a lot of ways that things could go wrong, even when you follow all the protocols we now have. But Adam was doing this at a time when the protocols weren't always so clear. You know, this was a fun little episode to chat about. Hopefully there will never be a COVID-23, or we could get a control of it much better than they have it under control in this movie, where it is basically 95% airborne, like don't leave your house airborne type of airborne. But it was a fascinating chat. There's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about the production, but also what it was like for them to write this under quarantine and to move so fast into production and to continue writing during production and changing it and writing for a production that they knew was going to have limitations. So I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig while you're surfing around online, I hope you'll also check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You know, we're just about ready to release our big quarantine issue that we've been working on forever. It's going to have so much cool stuff in it. It's going to have scripts you cannot find anywhere else in the world, along with interviews with their screenwriters, because it's amazing unpublished works. That's kind of what's to note there that's so fascinating. We're going to also have cool interviews with filmmakers, showrunners of TV shows that we dig, comic book artists as well. So there's going to be a lot of great stuff in issue 42, which is our upcoming issue. We're going to be publishing it before the end of 2020. So it is still going to be this 2020 issue that we're publishing. And it would be great to have your support. And, you know, to try and chide you into supporting us, you could use coupon code SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5 over there at backstory.net. You could enter it in your shopping cart when you check out, SAVE5, SAVE and the number 5. And that'll save you $5 off a 1-year subscription. It will also, your credentials that you use to log in at backstory.net, they totally will work for a login on the iPad, but you just kind of have to use the coupon code at backstory.net, but it works on both. If you've never read us before, of course, I highly recommend and encourage you to check out our free issue, which you could read at backstory.net or through the Backstory app. And there's a lot of cool stuff in the free issue too. Who am I kidding, man? You'd really like it. So look, your support would mean everything to myself, my journalists, our editors, and of course, our extremely talented art director. So it would be great to have my podcast listeners support my passion project. So thanks for considering subscribing to Backstory Magazine. And of course, while you're surfing around online, don't forget to check out Songbird. And, you know, it's a great way to support independent films. There's a lot of wild ideas in it. Of course, you know, Adam and Simon have a lot of things going on with that COVID-23 in the future that we definitely do not want to see. But, you know, this is a time to support independent films. So I hope you'll check out their flick. But now, without any further ado, let's get right into our chat with co-writer Simon Boys and co-writer-director Adam Mason about their latest film, Songbird. Simon, Adam, welcome. Good to see you guys. How's it going over there?
Hello. Very well.
It's going well. Thanks. Good to be here.
Well,
nice to meet you.
So let's, you know, before we talk about your film, we're going to do this spoiler free first, as we always do. And then we're going to get into your film. And so I think the best place to start would be to give everybody a baseline. You know, did either of you go to film school? Were you trained for this per se, or just something that you loved and pursued?
Right. I went to film school, but Simon is way more educated than I am. You have an actual, Simon has a university degree. I went to the London International Film School in Covent Garden a long time ago. I think I started in 1997.
Okay.
So a while back.
What was the most important thing that you got out of film school? And do you recommend the education? Because people always debate it.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, times have changed, haven't they? So, but back then, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in England, in a tiny village, and I'd never really met anyone who was involved in film in any capacity. So it always felt like an almost stupid dream or aspiration to have. And then I actually went to university to study English, and I got kicked out after 6 months for just zero. I think I had 0% attendance, which is shameful, I know. And the careers advice woman was the last person I saw before they kicked me out the door. And she told me she said, maybe you should go to film school. She said, is there anything you're interested in life? And I said, well, I'd like to make films. And she said, well, you should go to film school. And that's the first time I'd ever really heard of it. And then I thought they'd never accept me. And then I miraculously got in. And it was great because it was the first time I'd ever met anyone else who had interest in making films. So from that sense, just the community thing and realizing that there were other people who had the same ambitions and dreams as I did was very inspiring for me.
That's great. Simon?
Yeah, I studied film and literature at university, but it was a more theory course.
And where'd you go?
Warwick, in the UK, and which is a great course, and I loved it. And I did it because I was and wanted to be a writer, and that was my reason for doing that. But it was not a course that taught you the building blocks of how to make things. But anything that I do know, I learned from watching movies and reading scripts and then trying my hand at, writing from a pretty early age in my teens. And that was kind of my film education, I guess.
Well, I was going to say it's the birthplace of Shakespeare, but that's the wrong Stratford, is it, Simon?
It's close. No, it is. No, it's very close to Stratford-upon-Avon. Yeah, where Shakespeare lived and wrote. Yeah, me and Shakespeare have a lot in common.
Yeah, I mean, it's apparent, especially in today's movie. So
right, yeah.
they're lovers. They're separated by a wall. There's no trellis for him to climb. He's just outside the door.
Yeah.
Well, Shakespeare.
Well, so Adam, it's always interesting to hear breaking in stories, and like you got out of school and. You said you went to school there in 97 and the first film that I saw that you made was Dust in 2001. What was your...
Actually, I made one before that in 1999. These are things I never talk about, by the way, but I'll talk about them to you.
Okay. Well, what was your first film in 99 and then Dust, and what was just your biggest experience that that you learned on each of those, if you were to condense it into one thing that was really important for you as a filmmaker to go on to the next project?
I mean, I suppose it was just the tenacity of keeping going. I realized while I was still at film school that I was more or less unemployable. Every job I'd ever had, I had been fired from. So I was just desperately trying to work out how I could make some kind of living out of making movies. So while I was still at film school, I hit upon a plan where I stole a friend of mine's little brother. Went to a private school in England. And he had a yearbook, and the yearbook had all of the parents from the school's addresses and phone numbers in it. So I sent about 200 letters to these people. I kind of worked out. I asked the kid who were the rich parents at the school, like the dentists and the doctors and stuff, and I sent them letters, and I got ignored by about 99%. And I think two or three people came back to me wanting to put some money in, and then ultimately. Two of them financed my first movie that I made it for like £30,000, and it was a really, really terrible horror movie.
And wait, what was the title of that, or were you talking about Dust or the one before Dust?
No, that was called The 13th Sign, and then those same investors were surprised that movie made money. It inexplicably. It got worldwide distribution and ended up in Blockbuster Video, which was it was the first of those wave of films. I don't know if you remember when the Canon XL1 camera came out.
Yeah.
And people started making... It was a way of making movies really cheap because it was the first time that the digital cameras allowed us to make film without having to spend at least £20,000 of dollars on film stock and processing and that kind of stuff. So I made that movie and it got released, and it did... for considering it cost next to nothing, it actually did really well. And consequently, I got to make another movie that I wrote myself, and it was a lot more strange, I would say. And
that was Dust.
That was Dust. And then I just kept going. And then I realized that it was quite hard to make a living out of making these no-budget movies, even though I was still living like a student on £100 a week or whatever. And so I started making music videos. It turned out that the kind of horror movies I was making seemed to appeal to people in metal bands primarily. And so they started contacting me, and I made my first music video for like £100 or something. That was an Evil Dead inspired music video.
Awesome. And I love Evil Dead.
Yeah, and it snowballed from there, and I ended up, I've made hundreds of music videos now, and back then in the early 2000s, I started making a really good living doing those. I would do 3 or 4 a month at one point, and the budgets kind of went up and up. And that was how I met Simon. Simon graduated from university, and I was the only person in our area who ever did anything film related. So I guess he got my number and cold called me wanting work experience, and he came and worked on my very first music video.
I love how all the cold calling you guys do actually works out, because so much of it doesn't.
Well, we've had a lot that hasn't, but we're definitely making it sound like every time we pick up the phone something happens. But
Simon, you basically stalked Adam. That was basically what happened.
Yeah, well, we should say we went to the same school, but Adam's a bit older than me, so we never knew each other at school. I think you left the year I arrived. So
yeah.
But all the way through school, I'd heard that there was this guy who'd made movies who'd gone to my school, and so I had that connection. So I did just call out of the blue, and then it was total coincidence. But Adam was like, I'm starting a music video company. Do you want to come and help out? And I literally showed up and was just carrying heavy equipment around. But then we got to talking, and I said I wanted to write, and he said, well, I'd really like a writing partner, and let's see what happens. And that was 18 years ago.
Yeah. And then we set about making a low budget horror film that we
ended in 2006, right?
Broken, yeah. We started that in 2004 probably, and that was more or less a no budget movie. We made it for I think £5,000.
Wow.
I would basically finance it through my music videos, so I'd pay crew members to come and do a music video, and then I'd pay them a little bit extra, and they'd stay for the weekend, and we'd film a couple of days here and a couple of days there. And over a couple of years, we put together this really nihilistic little horror movie. It was back when directors like Alexandra Arja were making High Tension and those kind of films, that these kind of nasty French wave of horror was making money. And so we kind of quite cynically set about making this nasty little nihilistic horror movie that ended up appropriately coming out through the Weinstein Company, and it did well at festivals and so on, and then got us noticed over in LA, and we got an upgrade. I think sorry, someone's calling me. We got an upgrade to, I think the next movie we made was like £300,000 budget, financed by a Hollywood company. And we filmed that in England. And then that got into Toronto Film Festival. And off the back of that, signed to CAA and were able to get work visas and move over to LA.
That's great. What was your biggest lesson off Broken? Just because it was something that you had to piecemeal. It was kind of a labor of love, but you kept going, because that's an interesting way to shoot it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, don't do it if you don't love it, because it was so hard work.
Yeah, and also don't make a horror movie in the UK in a wood in November. It was at nighttime. It was freezing.
That's probably the most sound advice that you could give anybody. Well, so I want to get to today's film, Songbird. I know you guys have other collaborations that you did between, but I want to make sure we have enough for this, because there's a lot of complicated stuff to discuss. You, of course, depress, the only spoiler I'm going to give in this section is you, of course, depress your entire audience in the first minute by having a news story explain that we're on COVID-23 and that LA has been in lockdown for about 3 years now, which just sounds utterly fantastic. How did you come up with this concept, and tell us about this wild ride of getting it written and then I believe shot during the pandemic as well?
Sure. I mean, I'll tell the first part of the story, which was that I just started pre-production on a movie that Simon and I wrote. That was a real kind of passion project of ours. It was a script that I was really desperate to make, and finally I was given the opportunity to make it.
What was it called?
It was called Luna. It was with Blumhouse, and we just started pre-production on the Monday, and it was that terrible week when it seemed like, is this virus thing real? Are we really going to get shut down? What the fuck is going on? And we were in pre-production, and every day I was just like, are we actually going to be making this movie in 4 weeks' time? And it just seemed less and less likely. And then finally we got to Friday and we all got sent home. And that was the first day of lockdown. And I was obviously, like everyone else was in the world, I was extremely concerned, worried about my wife and my 3 little kids. And I got elderly parents back home in England that I couldn't see, and I was, extremely worried. And then Simon called me up the next morning. I'll let you pick it up there, Simon.
Yeah, I just have to, every time I tell the story, I have to shout out to my mother, because I was on the phone with her on the Saturday morning she's back in the UK, obviously, and explaining to her that we had this film that was in pre-production, and then it had all just gone away amongst all the other stuff that was going on. And she, in a very like mom kind of way, said, "Oh, well, people will just have to figure out another way to do things." And at the time, I just thought, yeah, great, that's not very helpful. But when I hung up the phone, I was like, we could make a movie. Like, we all had. We know lots of actor friends. We have phones and Zoom and everything else. So I called Adam and I just said, let's just write something. Let's send pages out to everyone we know, get them to film it, send it back to us. We'll cut it together and we'll make a movie while all this crazy stuff's going on. And that was the very initial conversation we had. Obviously, it then spiraled into something much bigger. But
I mean, at the same time, Simon and I had always wanted to have a podcast. We love podcasts. So this opportunity arose where, because of the music videos I do, I've been doing a bunch of stuff with this band called Korn, a metal band. And they wanted to do a podcast, like a drama, just not really about the band, but for whatever reason, they liked podcasts too, I guess. And so Simon and I started writing this podcast. It was about a cult, a doomsday cult. And a missing child who had fallen prey to the cult, and the journalist goes to try and find the kid, basically. And Simon and I had been writing it when I was back in Europe and he was in LA, and we wanted to try and put together a test of what it would sound like, read out loud by actors. So we sent the pages to actors that we knew and got them to just read it into their iPhones. They didn't even use proper microphones. Yeah. And then they sent me the MP3s, and I edit most of my own stuff. So I just cut together what I thought was just going to be a rough episode, and it ended up being so good that it was finished, and it struck me that actors are so incredibly savvy with technology because they're constantly having to put themselves on tape for auditions. Yeah. And they often don't have someone to act opposite, so they're having to kind of play both parts and give these 10 out of 10 professional performances with nothing to act off. And so we did it with this podcast, and the actors literally never met each other, let alone performed opposite each other. And when we put them together through the magic of this alchemy of filmmaking, or whatever you want to call it, it was just a seamless thing. So when Simon kind of pitched me this idea of why don't we make a movie and we'll get actors we know to record themselves with iPhones, it just really felt like a visual way of doing what we'd already done and achieved really well with the podcast.
And did you release that podcast?
We're just finishing it now. Actually, it got shut down. It was.
What's it going to be called?
It's called The Nothing.
Okay.
And we did actually now. We've finally finished Songbird a couple of weeks ago, so now we're just trying to wrap that up in the next couple of weeks, actually. But it was extremely liberating. And so we wrote this document on the first day of lockdown. We wrote a 12-page document called Songbird. That was half a kind of call to arms about how we thought we could make a movie when no one else could. Like during it seemed like an impossible time. Everything had been shut down. But we were pretty convinced that through these techniques we could do something. And we outlined what was at the time, it was a monster movie set during a lockdown and a pandemic, where there were like 200-foot monsters, kind of like Cloverfield, roaming the streets of Los Angeles.
Wow.
And it was all very contained. Everyone was stuck within their homes like we were. And it seemed like something that we could probably, with some visual effects, pull off to quite a high standard. And then we sent it to a producer called Adam Goodman, who used to run Paramount. He was the chairman of Paramount, and he was someone that Simon and I had a bunch of meetings with, and he's a very interesting guy, very forward thinking. And for whatever reason, I thought that he would respond to the material, so we sent it to him. It wasn't like we were looking for a budget or any financing. It was something that Simon and I were just going to do completely off our own backs. But we sent it to him more out of a sense of like, just felt like he would gel with it and that it might go somewhere. And the very next day, he called me up and basically. He said, I want to greenlight the movie. Let's start today, pre-production. I was like, okay. So it very quickly snowballed from there. And then 2 weeks later, Michael Bay came on board.
And this is the version, though, that still had the big monsters.
To start with, yeah.
At the very beginning, yeah.
Okay.
That changed pretty quickly. Well, I think it was Adam Goodman who was saying, like, there's no monster that we can think of that's... Because we were kind of going to use the monster as a metaphor, and he was like, there's nothing scarier than what's really happening. And it was at that point every day. It was just, there was you were waking up to kind of new horrors about the world we actually lived in. And so that's when it started to take on, maybe we actually use we don't need a monster to represent the virus. The virus is the monster, you know?
Yeah. I mean, today's November 10th, 2020. And, you know, yesterday we just surpassed 3,000 deaths in the United States for the first time. So it's worse than ever, unfortunately.
It's frightening. Yeah.
Well, there's something really scary about a monster that you can't see, like an invisible monster, like walking my dog every day. Like I'm scared of this like thing I can't see. Somehow that seemed a lot more scary than a 200-foot Cloverfield type monster somehow.
Yeah. So no, absolutely. You know, I want to get into your creative habit for a second, both on this film and on other films as well. How important is outlining to your process?
Yeah, it is very. I mean, we used to outline even more than we do now. We like pretty famous for having some of the longest outlines, I think, of anybody. I remember
like how long? Give us a sense.
We once turned in an outline that was over, I think it was 77 pages of like a word.
It's basically a script. Yeah, it's longer than a script.
It was longer than a script.
In terms of word count.
Did it have dialogue or was it just prose?
It was mostly prose, and the executives who read it were not thrilled to receive a 77-page document. So we learned a valuable lesson that day. But at the same time, when we came to write the script, we had everything figured out. But I think it depends kind of project to project. I mean, it always starts with an idea. Obviously, one of us will call the other and go, hey, what about this? And then we start talking. It all begins with obviously talking, just the two of us talking, whether it's on the phone or in person. Well, not now, but in the old days. And just trying to crack the story and the characters. And then we'd usually go and start outlining. One thing we've also found really helpful is sometimes just going straight to writing pages and just getting an act one because it sets the tone so nicely.
Interesting.
And the dialogue as well, and then stopping, you know, and going back to outline and you can change things, obviously, and a lot of things do change when we do it that way. But we find it really helpful finding the voice of the characters that way, more so than a big, heavy outline.
Do you card when you outline, or is it just like bullet points or prose?
Depends, doesn't it?
Again,
we often do cards.
Yeah,
we like doing cards.
We do like cards, but I think part of the problem is we just get too excited sometimes about the idea and we want to just get on with it. But we definitely take the time to figure everything out before we hit the final page. We don't just kind of meander through final drop trying to figure things out as we go.
On that note, you know, when you sit down to write, like I'm actually going to say pre-pandemic times, and you could tell me what it's been like during this, is when you sit down to write, do you give yourself a certain page count that you want to hit each day, or do you go for a certain amount of hours to write each day on your daily habit?
I'd say for me, it depends entirely on the day and how. I mean, I've had days where I've sat in front of my laptop for 8 hours and produced almost nothing. And then I've had other days where I've sat there for an hour and produced 10 pages. I think we're both really fast. I think we're the kind of people who prefer to write quickly and then go back and polish and work and change. And we're not afraid to throw things out. We love
rewriting, don't we?
Yeah. Whereas I was, you know, like everyone else, you kind of follow the titans out there who like to give their opinions on how to write scripts and stuff. And I always hear like, oh, a 3-page day is a great day. And I'm like, the way we work, I can write 3 pages in 15 minutes. They won't be very good, but I can do it. And so I think we probably prefer to write to set pieces or a sequence or scenes and then go back and explore it, what's working, what's not, and keep reiterating on that. Some days I'd prefer to get up and just go back over what we've done 2 or 3 days before, then start something new. I think it just depends on your mood and what's happening that day and whether you slept well. And it's such a strange, you know, it's a hard thing to define. But,
we often, like with Songbird, we did a scriptment, really. We wrote an outline. It was probably, I think it ended up being about 50 pages. And then we started turning that into a scriptment that became the script. So when it came to write the script, we wrote the script in like 3 days, basically. But that wasn't like starting with a blank page and writing 100 pages in 3 days. It was because we'd already done several weeks, if not a month or more, of like very solid groundwork. And we had a very solid document. It was essentially the entire structure of the movie. So it was really just filling in the gaps with dialogue and so on.
Well, that was also like writing while kind of simultaneously being in pre-production. So like we had our villain character who was written fine, but kind of like perfunctory, like this is the kind of thing he'll say. And then we find out, oh, we're getting Peter Stormare. And it was like, now we have to go in and like make this a great role, you know? So it was kind of weird. This process was a little different to our usual process.
You know, on that note, how long would you say that you spent on your outline? Because sometimes writers could spend longer on their outlines than their actual script because they do so much heavy lifting, but it's different for everybody.
I think on this one we did, because it was literally like that first day that we spoke with Adam Goodman, and he said, I'm greenlighting the movie, I want to do this, that we suddenly, like, we were just off to the races. Like, we have to come up with characters, story, the world. And so we just started writing these documents, and there were just documents piling up that we were sending around and getting notes back. And it just
and that was just your outline still. Yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, suddenly you realize you've got a 50-page thing.
What was it? Sorry to interrupt. What was it that Adam actually approved then? Like a pitch?
Initially it was the pitch, original 12-page document, which was 6 pages of how we can do this and 6 pages of a monster movie during a lockdown.
Got it.
But it was actually very similar. It was an interesting situation because it was the only time in our careers where we were essentially having to manage the practical production issues of a movie whilst we were writing it, instead of just writing it from a purely kind of creative point of view. We had to consider safety, for example. Like, every scene was written from the point of view of, like, how can we do this safely? And then it was also like, just how can we do it? Like, to start with, we didn't think that we could have scenes with 2 actors having a conversation. So
and we'll get there, I promise.
Right. But so we designed it from the ground up. So we also knew that it needed to be a big ensemble movie with multiple characters, just because we didn't know how many days we could spend with any particular actor. So it made sense to take that Robert Altman approach of having intertwining narratives that all kind of intersected through fate, through the story of our movie. But those were all decisions that we made for practical reasons. And so we kind of built it organically from the ground up, in terms of always knowing that it was a movie we were going to make, which is a luxury that we don't normally have.
And so how long would you say that your outline was before you really started doing script pages?
50 something, probably.
Yeah, 50 something.
And how long did it take you to get that?
Probably 6 weeks. 6 weeks, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then once you started writing your pages, how long would you say you spent writing your pages?
Like 3 days.
Well, really? for a first draft, but we were writing all the way through the process as well. I mean, there were literally, while Adam was shooting, I would be like getting notes and rewriting things and then flipping them to him, and he was like reading them during his break, and sending me changes back. And so it was a lot of writing in total, but it was that weird thing. It was like the train is on the tracks and the track's still being built, and we're writing while we're pre-producing, while we're casting, like, all these pieces are falling into place. We're looking at locations and we're like, okay, so we have to make that work now, like, so it was a very unusual process.
Well, so but we should also probably say that we took the outline that we had that was very detailed, and we copied and pasted that into final draft. And by the time we then formatted our outline into, like, these are the scenes, this is the structure, here's the slug lines and so on, that then became like a 50-page script. Sorry, my people keep calling me, and I don't know how to stop that from happening. And so we basically had 50 pages to start with. So it was really the 3 days. We wrote the script in 3 days. Things kind of bullshit, because it was really just fleshing out what we already had.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Well, so when Michael Bay came on, obviously you have one of the most experienced action directors in the world here, lending his hand and his name to this. That would probably open a lot of doors for you guys. Tell us about some of the logistics and what it was like to work with the city of LA to shoot during lockdown. In Variety today, they just said at CBS Radford, another TV show got shut down. Like, I think for its second time that it had been, trying to follow all the protocols, and it's just so hard. So what were some of the challenges and hoops that you guys had to jump through to make this movie?
Well, none of the protocols existed when we were in pre-production. We were the people who, we worked very closely with the unions to create them. So that was something that was going on concurrently with the creative process that Simon and I were going through of writing the script. It was constantly being influenced by the conversations that we were having with SAG and having with the DGA and the other crew unions. So it was a really fascinating way of making a movie. And it was also, I think, because Simon and I come from such a guerrilla filmmaking background, that we weren't intimidated by the fact that everything had to be stripped down. It wasn't catastrophic for us, that we were going into this with the absolute bare minimum of a skeleton crew that you could ever get away with making a movie with. But that said, when Michael Bay came on board, he gave us incredible access to the kind of talent that work on Michael Bay movies that are absolutely the cream of the crop. So one of the first people who came on board was our director of photography, this guy, Jacques Jouffret, who's worked with Michael Bay for years and years.
The film looks absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And that's because of Jacques, and Jacques, as soon as I mean, Simon and I came up with the concept of Songbird, but then it was really a scenario of standing on the shoulders of giants, because all of these great people came on board, and Adam Goodman came on board, and he brought Michael Bay on board, and Michael Bay brought all of this insane talent. So we had Lorne Balfe, the composer, who's one of the greatest living composers. You know, he really is. He did our film in between doing Mission Impossible scores. You know, you would never get our budget was pocket change for this movie, so we would never. You know, I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I would have ever been able to get any of these people even looking at the script for this movie. But because of Michael Bay and because of the scenario of us being the only movie going into production, we were able to get Demi Moore to read the script, and we were able to get this incredible DP, for example. So it was.
Well, tell us about
crazy.
your camera crew for a second, just to give us a sense. Like, you know, a cinematographer like that usually has a really big camera crew, and there's a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
And how many people were in the stripped down version of that camera crew?
I mean, it was tiny, but it was
the lead, the assistant. Like, how many assistants? How many
we had a
ACs?
couple. There were 2 camera assistants. There was a gaffer and a grip. That was it.
One gaffer, one grip.
Yeah, and a DOT.
Wow.
But
it's like a film school project almost.
It was, yeah. But you know, because I do so many music videos, and Simon and I have done movies. Even recently, a few years ago, we did a movie that got into South by Southwest that we made for like $15,000. And for years, I really like filming. I really like cameras and stuff. I like every aspect of the filmmaking process.
Yeah.
So I build my own camera rigs. When I'm doing my music videos, I DP them myself, even though I'm not like the world's best DP by any means. But
That's great.
I just do it because I really enjoy it. And then I knew that when we were making Songbird that I would have to find a DP, for example, that kind of shot the way I like to shoot, which is no frills. Like, I don't need massive 12K lights to feel like I'm making a movie. Like, I like everything to be as small and compact as possible. So when I met Jacques and I talked to him, and I saw the trailer for one of the Purge movies, and I was kind of like, that kind of looks like a much better version of one of my films that I shoot myself. Like, I could tell that he's shot in a style that I shoot, but I'm like the novice and he's the genius.
Right.
So within 2 seconds of talking to him, I just knew that we gelled, and basically we did the whole movie with like tiny LED lights and practical lighting. So there were no movie lights involved in the making of the movie whatsoever. And Jacques wasn't intimidated by that. He loved it.
When you were on set for a typical shot, how many people would you say would be on set with you? If there was one grip, one gaffer, 2 camera assistants, a DP, how many sound folks?
No sound folks. Like, the actors had to mic themselves.
Really?
But
there had to be a mixer, right? A recorder?
There was a mixer, but he wasn't. I mean, we basically were involved in the creation of the zone system, which is the system that now is being used all over the world, where you have different zones. This is all COVID stuff. You have different zones, and different crew members aren't really allowed to pass, or aren't allowed to go into the different zones. So the A zone is being on set with the actors, and it was just the actors. It was me. It was the AD. It was Jacques, the DP, and a couple of camera assistants. So there were maybe like 4 or 5 different people on set at any given time, and we would all have to wear the full PPE. So it would be the N95 masks and the face shields, and the only people who wouldn't wear masks were the actors, and they would only not wear the mask during the take.
Right.
And everyone who was in the A zone, we were all tested. I was tested 3 times a week, and we all basically had to quarantine outside of the production, so that before anyone on set with me before it began, and most importantly during it. So everyone would know that I hadn't been anywhere outside of my family, and my family were quarantining as well with me. So there was just absolute safety, really. But I think the difference between us and like the Batman movie that got shut down, or Jurassic Park that got shut down because of COVID, is that they're still using the old school Hollywood ways of making movies, where there's 500 people on a crew. We were like 4 people, you know, and we got through the entire process without a single positive case.
You know,
but that was because it was so contained.
Just something basic, like, you know, one of the first rules in film school is feed your crew, and you'll have a happy crew. Like, how would you do meals? Would it just be catering truck that would show up? Like, how would that work?
Yeah. We had a catering truck where they were all doing the full PPE thing. There was no craft service, which was unusual and healthy. Healthy. And it was the only movie where I've actually lost weight, put it that way. And all the meals were prepackaged, so there was no buffet or anything like that. And we would all eat completely separately. It was the only time we could take our mask off, but it wasn't like you could have a conversation with anyone because you would be completely by yourself.
Doing your zone system, which, people also sometimes refer to as pods, different groups. It's interesting because, in horror writing, one of the things that they teach you for low budget horror writing is to pick a location, take advantage of it, right? Use what you have. Here you have the limitation of having people and scenes. And it's interesting because you overall never ended up with more than 2 people in a scene beyond some of the fights. And
yeah.
Many of the scenes were actually just solo takes. So it seems like you engineered that on the script phase. Was that like a plan, which you said, like, for talking scenes, there's never going to be more than 2 people in a scene?
Yeah. I mean, I think right at the very beginning, we were like, can anybody be in the same room together for anything? So when we were talking about the Griffin family, and, you got Demi and Bradley and their daughter, and it's like, can we actually do this? So there were all those kinds of conversations going on. And that's why so many of the people are isolated. Like Dozer has, PTSD and doesn't leave his home and is very isolated.
Right.
And so that was very much by design at the script level. And I think partly because we still had in mind originally this idea that we would send pages out to these people and they would kind of film themselves in the location. And then, of course, it just became something bigger. And I think it was Jacques who was really pushing, we have to have a real camera and a point of view that isn't just an iPhone in every scene.
Yeah.
And it went from, I think, being designed as if it was going to be 80-90% iPhones and CCTV to being 80-90% more traditional coverage, and smaller amount of stuff, which Adam could speak to better than me. But definitely, yeah, it was very much in our minds, we are very limited on what we can do. And of course, that's where the Sarah Nico story comes from. Let's put a deal between them.
And what was your budget and schedule?
17 days with a couple of days at the end, 19 total.
Wow.
And then budget was tiny. Let's just say it was under 5, but it was as small as it could be. It's absolutely as small as it could be. I mean,
it was like a War of the Willing, in which people probably just wanted to do something during quarantine.
It was. But that became apparent very quickly, because when we finished the script and we were going out to the town, we had no idea how it was going to be received, or if anyone was even going to want to risk, their health to make a movie, of all things. But it became apparent very quickly that everyone was really intrigued by the project, because it was the only movie in town back then. Right. So I think that was enough to get people curious enough to want to read the script. And then once they read the script, that at least put to bed any concerns they had about it maybe being inappropriate to make a movie about COVID, because they were able to see, it's a Romeo and Juliet love story that actually has a really hopeful message. It's about people. It's not really about the virus. That's more like the canvas that the movie's painted on than the movie itself. So yes, everyone was curious, and then they would talk to me, and then I think that they would feel they'd want to know how we were going to do it. Like, everyone that we knew and everyone that we came into contact with wanted to know how can we make a movie right now. And then once they realized that the health and safety was at the forefront of any decision that we were making, we just managed to get the most incredible cast, really. That was not something we anticipated. Like Simon said, we were originally planning on using our actor friends to kind of film remotely with their iPhones at home, and it just gradually snowballed, or very quickly snowballed, into this much bigger thing.
Well, it's interesting because, like, at the end of the day, you would be working, if you were under 5, within the confines of the indie waiver that a lot of unions have set up. So were the unions pretty good about making deals, from SAG all the way down, since you were an under $5 million movie? Yeah.
I mean, I was directing, I wasn't producing, so I wasn't involved in that on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, the unions were very supportive of us. I think everyone was trying to find a way to get back to work.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we were making a movie and all that side of it, but it was fundamentally driven by everyone wanting to find a way of making a movie. Like, the entire town shut down on that day in March. The film industry across the world just stopped.
Yeah.
And I think that was why people asked me why Michael Bay got involved. And I think it wasn't because of the script or the subject matter. It was just because Michael Bay loves making movies more than anything in the world. And he was really curious, like, how can these 2 guys from England say that they're going to make a movie?
Yeah. Well,
and that kind of translated to everyone.
I want to have time to talk about the story details of the movie itself. So we're going to make our spoiler announcement now. Podcast listeners on iTunes and Spotify, or folks watching us on the YouTube Backstory Magazine page, press pause if you have not yet seen Songbird. Go rent it, find it on VOD, however you could get it. You know how to do that. and then come back because we're going to get into the finer story points. So you have been warned with your spoiler alert now. So here we are. First easy question, just the title. What does Songbird mean to you guys? How did you come up with the title?
Simon came up with it. I mean, it was whenever we write anything, I'm not trying to blame you. I love the title.
You're pushing that off onto me. Yeah.
I mean, whenever we write a document, whenever we have an idea, we'll normally do like a couple of page outline or something. And then the hardest conversation we ever have is what are we going to call this fucking thing? You know, it's a conversation we've had on every project. And it's, for whatever reason, like titles are just something that seem like the hardest thing to conceive of. So we normally have a process once we've written 5,000 words or whatever it is, where we just talk for an hour, like what are we going to put on the front page just as a working title. And so we knew that we wanted the movie to not sound like a horror movie. We wanted it to have a hopeful title. And so we were just bandying together. We like one word titles. Just wanted something that was kind of impactful and memorable. Because we also did like a sizzle reel thing, like a proof of concept visualizer. That we sent out with the pages. So we were looking for something that would look good in the context of a trailer as well. And Simon,
what did you start to interrupt? What did you put on the sizzle reel? What were some of the images that you would go to?
I mean, normally what we do is we do, title cards like you see in a traditional trailer that kind of outline or tease at least the gist of the story. In this case, it was the monster movie Cloverfield found footage type thing set during a lockdown and a pandemic, or what appeared to be a pandemic. And then it was every movie that we could think of that was in any way similar. So there was obviously Cloverfield. There was movies like Unfriended, because we thought we were going to film it in that, use Zoom calls and all that kind of stuff.
I think Cloverfield was quite an inspiration for the title as well, in a way, like having a title that doesn't on the surface appear to mean a great deal. And that was particularly more when we were thinking of it as a monster movie. But there were iterations in development where the Songbird was a much bigger part of the narrative as well.
Well, tell us. What was it? Was because I mean, I would guess May is the Songbird, right? Because she's the singer.
Well, originally it was Sarah, because I mean she's an artist.
I mean, you're right. That would make sense. But yeah, it was sort of, the original concept was that there would be this graffiti and we didn't know who was doing it, kind of a Banksy kind of vibe where someone was graffitiing these songbirds all over. And if you saw it, it was kind of a symbol of hope, like a don't give up, like, however bad it gets kind of thing. And somewhere along the way in the development that sort of disappeared. And there was Sarah at one point was going to kind of become the songbird, this sort of voice of hope for other people. But
there's a split second in the movie when, after Lita, the grandmother character, dies, where you see that she's drawing on the door, but for whatever reason we couldn't pull off the drawing, so I tried to cut away from it as quickly as possible. She was drawing the sign of the songbird on the grandmother's door, right, as a tribute to her. But originally she was a graffiti artist who we then found out was spraying the symbol of the songbird around the city, and we had a whole revolution subplot where at the end basically Nico and Sarah sparked a revolution in the city. That opened a can of worms. Yeah. That
goes into my next question, really, because it's always fun to hear left turns and things that could have been. And there is a revolutionary aspect. I was going to talk about this later, but since you brought it up now, when Nico is, looking like he's at his end at the warehouse versus, the antagonist, basically a random guy shows up who's army trained, who's part of some resistance, and it would seem that would be left over from your revolution subplot. So actually tell us who that guy represents for you, and did he have more to do in this other version? Because I was kind of fascinated. It's always fun to see like when you're in fringes of a bigger world at play, which you have going on here, because it's, the first thing that you'll notice, sorry to keep going on this, but the first thing you'll notice is that there's the Q zone, the quarantine zone, which you have images of from the outside, but would be impossible to get, all these extras together and really show inside during this movie. So that was kind of your limitation, and it's talked about. And you get the sense that people are dragged into the Q zone and it's not a good place. We don't know any more about it. So tell us about the Q zone and possibly the revolution that would fit into it.
Yeah. I mean, initially, I think one of the very original versions, like we had a whole third act that went into the Q zone, and it was kind of like this sort of shanty town, really, really scary kind of District 9 kind of vibe. And then of course we couldn't do any of it because you can't have, as you say, all those extras, and also just the money to get the scale of it. So those kind of ideas were discussed a lot and certainly put into some of the outlines. And it just became apparent that we couldn't really do that. And so we wanted the Q zone then to become this sort of this scary place that you don't want to see what it's like inside. And you just know that if you're going to get taken there, it's kind of a one-way ticket. And that was what it sort of developed into.
We also had a wall. Originally LA was divided into two by a wall that segregated the haves from the have-nots. So basically the poor were on one side of the wall and the rich were on the other, which was a theme that then ended up still being in the DNA of the finished movie, but we took away the literal wall because it felt like a double beat with the Q zone.
Where was the wall? What street was it on?
It was on Highland Avenue.
I think one of the challenges with the Resistance plotline was we didn't want to give the impression that it was a good idea to break lockdown and pour out onto the streets and rebel against this tyrannical government or something, because we weren't trying to make any political statements, and also we think people should follow the guidelines and stay at home, obviously. So it was really delicate to be like, we want to have that spirit of break free and break out of this cycle, but actually you do need to stay at home and stay safe. So,
well, I mean, that's the fascinating thing in which when you're just giving morsels of exposition, it's up to people how they interpret it. I kind of saw it as people were trying to do their best to quarantine.
Right.
But there's something that seems nefarious because your antagonist is heading one of the social service agencies and he is not a good guy. And he's seemingly threatening to drag people away and put them in the Q zone just at a whim sometimes beyond the health service as well. So,
yeah.
I mean, we did have that originally, didn't we?
Sorry. Yeah.
Right up until the 11th hour, we had a revolution at the end of the movie, but it became apparent that it fundamentally undermined the stakes of the virus as an antagonist within the movie, and it made Nico and Sarah feel a bit stupid that they could have just gone outside all along. So
it implied that it wasn't dangerous, which is obviously not true. So we didn't get into that. And I think but one of the big challenges of the story was definitely, without suddenly Nico discovering a cure for everyone, which just would just be so cheesy, how do you have an uplifting ending? And of course, them getting together is like a moment of happiness that they finally get to be together. But we wanted to try and end on a more like, don't give up, hope is on the way, like help is on the way, hope is still out there kind of feeling, but without suddenly, Nico discovers the cure in his bathroom and everyone's going to be fine, which is just ridiculous. So those challenges were pretty like big discussions we were having constantly at the development stage.
But it was really strange as we were developing the movie and then making it, how when it started, I don't know if you remember, but I mean, the world has changed so much in the last 8 or 9 months. But when it started, I always remember talking to my dad about the Blitz in London. He's 85, so when he was like 10 or young, a little bit younger, that was when the Blitz was happening, and he always talked to me about how it was actually perversely like a wonderfully kind of unifying memory in his mind, and how it brought people together, and there was a real sense of community and adventure and spirit back then. And in the first weeks of the lockdown, it kind of, although we were all scared, it kind of brought people together, and it was like, holy fuck, like I'm in LA, but my mum and dad are 6,000 miles away in London, but through the miracle of technology, I can talk to them every day. And so the movie itself had this kind of real sense of hope in it. But then we didn't anticipate that the whole thing would become politicized in the way it did. And so we ended up having to be really careful with that's why we tried to studiously avoid any kind of political message, just because like I'd never anticipated, and nor did Simon, I don't think, that like just wearing a mask could become a controversial thing, And so we had to be really careful with the message at the end of our movie. Like we didn't want to say rise up, because we don't think we're people who take it very seriously, the lockdown and the pandemic. So our message,
Go on. Sorry.
No, I was just saying it was the first time in our careers where we had to actually kind of consider that, like, we had a responsibility to try and put forward a responsible message, even though we were trying to make something that was a piece of science fiction. Yeah. It was a strange
you're right. A lot of people have said this on social media. Like, you think of the Great Generation, right, with World War II and all the sacrifices they had to make. There was rationing. You're talking about the London Blitz. You have to turn your lights off. You have to go to the bomb shelters. You have all that stuff going on. And then here in America, somehow wearing a mask and social distancing has become a politicized issue. And, I saw an obit the other day from a guy that passed away in Kansas, and his relatives wrote in the obit that he passed away, having gone through World War II. He was an elderly man. They said he passed away in a country where putting a piece of cloth over your face is seen as a sacrifice too great for anyone to make. And I thought that was a very apt thing to say. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is dangerous a little with these armed militias running around that are against lockdowns, are against maxing. They're probably against, vaccinations, but we haven't seen enough of that yet because the vaccination as of today isn't fully here yet. And so it is dangerous to have a corrupt politician per se as your antagonist. Talk about the creation of Harland as your, physical antagonist, whereas the virus is the unseen antagonist.
Yeah, I mean, Harland's not a politician or a political figure. He's basically risen to the head of the Department of Sanitation by default. Yeah, but he was a garbage man who a lowly garbage man, as he calls himself, who was promoted. I think I can't remember the line still in the film, but he goes, "That's what I call a promotion," because by default he ended up running the department. So he doesn't represent politics or authority.
Right.
He just got lucky in the world of the movie.
He also likes to kill people with a knife indiscriminately sometimes. I mean, like,
exactly.
Was your concept originally that he was kind of like a serial killer type that just was a garbage man?
He was actually.
He was right place at the right time.
Yeah, he's just a sociopath, basically.
I think there's a little element of that. People always say about The Walking Dead, the zombies are scary, but the humans out there are scarier. And I'm not saying that's what we're saying about this, but I think he's a guy who's taking advantage of the situation. And when Nico sees the opportunity to say, "Oh, I'm immune, I'm going to help people," this guy saw the opportunity. I'm immune. I'm a god. I can do what I like indiscriminately.
And that gets into the other structure that you kind of put in there, which is the concept of the munies, the people that are immune that you created, and they could, go about wherever they want. And the immune are generally trapped inside because your version of COVID-23 is pretty much 100% airborne or damn close to the point that people are very nervous to be outside.
Yeah.
And it could get them that way. And so, for that Muni lifestyle, it's interesting because Nico, your protagonist, is a Muni, and his job is running as a courier, right? So he's just biking all over the city, finally motorcycles when he has a chance. But it is interesting, as Harlan brings up, that the Munis have this advantage where they can go about, take over a house in the Hollywood Hills that they like, stuff like that. How did you decide on Nico actually just being a runner with his Muni privilege rather than something else crazy?
Well, I think it's just such a heroic choice to make because you could totally take advantage of being immune in this world. But I mean, we were saying like one of the big things that we realized is like, if this awful thing is going to happen, at least we're in a world where we can order things and have things delivered. But it's easy to forget that someone has to bring that to your door. And, Postmates and Amazon delivery guys and stuff, they're doing kind of heroic work like during this break. It's courageous. And it just seemed like a really cool job for two reasons. One, it feels heroic. It feels like he made a choice to help others and made a sacrifice because by being out there and, coating and essentially getting covered in this stuff, which means he can't be around other people. But it's also a way that we can get somebody moving across the city, connecting with people who are isolated and creating those connections between characters. So he knows when he's in trouble, he can go to the Griffins and ask them for help or whatever,
Well, and the virus, the COVID-23 thing was we had to create, a different version of the virus in real life, just because of the rules of the world. There were practical reasons that we had to do all those things. Like the mortality rate had to be through the roof because people still had to be in their homes 4 years later. And it was like, well, if we want Nico to be this rare bird, through being immune, then obviously everyone who gets infected can't then become immune because otherwise by this point everyone would be immune and the thing would be over. So it wasn't like we were trying to present this overly cynical version of a worst case scenario, pandemic. A lot of that was just to kind of like serve the structure of our narrative.
Just to circle back 1 second before I move forward, because I actually still want to know this. Who was that damn guy that showed up, the revolutionary, to save Nico's ass? So tell me this revolution subplot.
It's quite an interesting story. I mean, when we did the first teaser, the first thing Michael Bay saw was a teaser that we did where we have a very good friend called Paul Sloan, who's an actor. He's also a writer and he's also a maniac. He is just that character basically. And we would write little monologues for him and get him to film himself on his cell phone, where he would play this character called Nails, who was a muscle bound kind of steroid taking conspiracy theorist who would rant and rave about the state of the world. And we put together these little videos where he was basically our way into the world of Songbird, where he would narrate almost like a crazy Joe Rogan type character. And so Bay saw this guy and kind of fell in love with him as a character. And ultimately he was going to be the narrator throughout the movie. But like we said about the climate of the world changing over this year, like the conspiracy thing became a really real thing, and we didn't really want to indulge that, and we certainly didn't want to agree with any of that kind of way of thinking particularly. But Michael Bay just loved this guy who played this character of Nails in all of the original things that we filmed in trying to set up the movie. And so Michael wanted to come and shoot some stuff for the film. He shot a bunch of the second unit stuff, all of the motorbike stuff, for example.
Oh, that's awesome.
But he wanted to come and shoot a scene. So Simon and I wrote, I think day 19 of the 19-day shoot, we wrote a new scene where originally Nico, after he got stabbed by Harlan, just ran out of the warehouse and went home and started patching himself up. So we created this kind of new action scene where he ran into a bunch of Harlan's goons, and that was where. And Michael really liked that character of Nails, so we did a version of him who bumps into Nico and ends up saving him.
Okay. So it just happened. No, that's cool. Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine, my passion project, over at backstory.net or via our iPad app, Backstory. You could save $5 off a subscription using the code SAVE5. That's save and the number 5 over at backstory.net. And your login credentials will even work in our iPad app as well. But you got to use it in the shopping cart for that coupon code at backstory.net. And, you can read us on a desktop, laptop, or our iPad app, Backstory, of course. And if you've never read us before, it's a great place to test drive us. What's really cool is there's just cool scripts in here. Like some stuff that's very rare that hasn't been seen literally anywhere else in the world that we're publishing. But there's also, of course, interviews with filmmakers, comic book writers, TV show showrunners, all the usual stuff that we do as well. So there's a lot of cool stuff to choose from, and it would be absolutely fantastic to get your support because it's a strange time to be publishing a film magazine. I'll tell you that much. So look, check out the free issue. Let us know what you think. Drop us a line anytime. You could even give Backstory as a gift. Keep that in mind as well. You could give a gift subscription. And it would be great to have my passion project, Backstory Magazine, supported by my podcast listeners who have been with me for so long. So thanks for considering. Of course, while you're surfing around online, make sure to go see Songbird as well. You could rent it at the places you usually rent movies. There is a lot going on in this movie, so there is a lot to talk about. Make sure to see it. Spread the word about it. Support independent cinema. We're all helping each other out during these strange times that we're almost through, we hope. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our chat with co-writer Simon Boyes and co-writer-director Adam Mason to chat about their latest film, Songbird. And again, talking about writing to the atmosphere that you needed to, all your non-immune people, which would be technically your extras, stunt performers, they're in gas masks and hazmat suits. So you're actually creating a safe set by using that atmospheric, because you really are having, aside from your primary actors, everybody else was masked as a part of the movie and not just like a medical mask. Like they're wearing gas masks and hazmat suits. So that
makes for really scary bad guys as well, where you can't even see their eyes, and it's terrifying. Yeah.
And I want to talk for a second about those scenes where you are doing your one-on-ones. You have Bradley go to Maze. You have Demi and her kid, and Demi and Bradley. You have Sarah and Nico, and everybody else. Like, Dozer was off on his own, the guy with the drones, and that makes sense because he's the recluse. Lester, the hookup guy, right, who runs the delivery agency, he's off on his own. What were the challenges of filming those one-on-one scenes, especially when Nico crosses into, Demi Moore's house, Mrs. Griffin's house, and they have that very close exchange in the walk-in closet?
I mean, everything was incredibly challenging, primarily just because we didn't know whether we could or could not shoot certain things when we were in pre-production and when we were writing. So we didn't really know if we could have a scene where we could have two people talking in the same space. So then there were some scenes where we just couldn't avoid it and we just needed it to tell our story. So then we were getting into discussions of doing split screen type filming where they wouldn't be in the same space, and using all these remote cameras and so on. But
green screens, I would guess.
green screens and all that kind of stuff, which we spent a lot of time looking into all of those kind of techniques. But ultimately, when we started the movie in March, like testing was in its infancy. But by the time we started filming in June, you could get hold of testing, and there was rapid testing, and it was something that you could essentially purchase or pay for.
Yeah.
So we ended up just testing everyone. So any actor that came on set would be tested several days before and then on the day of filming. So in reality, it ended up being an incredibly safe set where we could have scenes between actors because everyone in that room would know that they had tested negative that day for coronavirus. So it meant that ultimately those scenes were relatively straightforward, of having KJ Apple with Demi Moore, for example. And it was just like filming a scene in 2019. There was not really any difference. But there was a lot of thought that had to go into it before, that's for sure.
They all worked great, and they were minimum, so I could tell that they weren't scenes that were that long. Would you shoot them with one camera or two, since you had such a limited crew?
Everything was single camera, but we were also, because we had written so many devices into the movie, like I would be filming. One of the fundamental things that allowed us to make the movie that happened was that our DP had done a commercial with Michael Bay that they had shot with Jennifer Lopez, I think, in Vegas, in January of this year, and they'd used a prototype Red camera, the camera company.
Okay,
yeah. They made this camera called a Komodo that's now available, but it wasn't when we shot the movie. And it's basically the size of a coffee cup, but it allows you to shoot 6K images. It's a cinema quality camera. It basically has all of the technology from their cameras that cost like $100,000, but it's this absolutely tiny little thing. You couldn't really have a camera any smaller than that would give you that quality. Huh. And so that camera basically opened a world of opportunity for us.
That's interesting. Just another exposition on the fringes question. There was these smoke plumes that you saw that were constantly going. Like, I thought maybe it was just something in particular was on fire, but it seemed like it was something constant. Were those to represent anything in particular? It seemed like they were from the Q zone.
Yeah, to my mind, they were Q zone. I mean, we were always trying to find ways to make abandoned LA look visually interesting.
Yeah, okay.
So there's only so many helicopters you can put in the movie.
I was curious if it was just something else. Well, so tell me something about one of your driving factors is the Nico seeking out a fake wristband that could be embedded in the state system so that he could get his girlfriend Sarah and him out of LA and to somewhere else. And it's dangerous at the beginning of the movie before we know that Sarah's actually immune, which she doesn't know. Because him getting her out with a fake band, while it would work to get them past guards and stuff, could still actually kill her. Mm-hmm. But what's fascinating is that the Griffins, who are purveyors of these bands, when Mr. Griffin goes out, Bradley Whitford, he is wearing a gas mask, like a breathing apparatus. And it made me wonder if actually the wristband that he's wearing is fake and they're actually not immune. So tell us about that kind of Griffin relationship and how that interplays.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is definitely that he is not immune, but he wears the band to get through the guard post, but he has this very, fancy mask with the oxygen tap and everything because he is at risk.
Yeah, what does she say to him? She says, "You wear that thing. Just because you wear that thing doesn't make it
true." And that's why she makes him burn his clothes when he comes back in. All this kind of stuff. Why?
That technically, just as the germaphobe, he is still outside when he's burning his clothes, and he's just opening their sliding glass door, which could let stuff in. So there's still high danger levels there.
Yeah,
I'm the guy lately who's been watching old movies, and anytime people are close, sharing food, hugging, I'm just like, oh,
I know, it's so strange. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some leaps there, I guess you have to make. But I think, that was definitely the idea. And I think the thing for Nico's original plan with Sarah was going to be, it's risky, but I'm going to get these bracelets. I'm going to quarantine. I'm going to come over. We're going to put masks on everybody, and we're going to get out of here because there is no life here. And then, of course, the timeline is brought forward by the events of the movie with Lita dying, and so all bets are off. I just got to try and get you out because the Q zone is the worst thing there is,
And that's where the postcard came from, the Big Sur, the idea of this kind of utopia outside of LA where people can live a life like it used to be, kind of thing. So as long as he got her there and then quarantined, then he figured that even though he thought she wasn't immune, they could live a life together away from the pandemic.
Beyond Thunderdome.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's interesting to talk about the Griffin's relationships for a second, because he says he's going out at night. He needs to get these illegal bans and stuff like that. But he's having this affair with May, and she's kind of trapped into it. And Demi Moore realizes that he's having the affair, and I couldn't tell. So I'm curious for your answer. There's no right or wrong answer here. I couldn't tell if she was angry and was selling her husband down the river because he was having an affair, or more toward her character goal, which is consistent throughout the movie, that she was seeing him as a risk to their daughter. And that seems to be her primary motive, because she also goes back and forth on she's ready to kill Nico because she's worried about it being exposed. But then when she has him dead to in her sights with a gun in his face, she realizes he's not a threat, decides to let him go because it's not going to hurt her daughter. But, she definitely sells her husband down the river, which winds up getting him killed.
Yeah.
And she has a slightly blasé attitude about whether or not he's having an affair. So was it more the disease and threat to the daughter that had her sell him out, or was it her jealousy of the affair?
Definitely the fear for her daughter. I mean, we actually had a cool backstory for them that didn't end up kind of making it into the finished movie, which was that they were kind of separated before the lockdown happened.
Fascinating.
And, sharing custody of the kid. And of course, when they realized this lockdown is becoming very restrictive and kind of permanent, or long running anyway, how's he going to see his daughter? So she invited him back into the family home so that they could be a family, so he could spend time with his daughter.
I absolutely love that. Why did you guys cut that?
I can't remember why.
We cut it because... why was it? It was because the affair thing didn't have... There was something more interesting somehow about a guy having an affair during a lockdown. Like, how do you go about doing that? It's so reckless. And it kind of made Bradley's character seem so reckless. Whereas before it was more like the original cut of the movie was 2.5 hours long. The script that we shot was 146 pages. So there there was a hell of a lot of really great material that was cut. There were also entire story threads that were cut, like characters that aren't in the movie that we shot, which the 2.5 hour version of the movie was a lot more of an indie movie. It really did feel like a Robert Altman movie in a lot of ways. Whereas ultimately the producers, and I agreed with it, wanted to kind of distill the movie down into a very commercial, streamlined movie that focused purely around Nico trying to save this girl that he loves. And so anything that was ancillary to that, essentially we kind of cut to see what the movie felt like. The film was also like a real case of smoke and mirrors, because it was so low budget and the restrictions that we were under with the whole COVID thing were so intense that if you break the movie down into just what's happening in an individual scene, there isn't really that much going on. But Simon and I knew from watching enough Chris Nolan movies that basically if you take multiple set pieces and you intercut them, you can create the illusion of a kind of blockbuster feel. And really Songbird it is really just an illusion. But so with Demi Moore, like that, it was also in the original version, she found out that he was having an affair a lot earlier on, but she didn't really care. She didn't feel cheated on. She just felt
because they were separated.
Loathing. Yeah, because they were separated but living under the house, under the same roof, which was a really interesting concept. But it took more real estate to get that concept across to an audience of like, oh wait, so they're not really together. It was kind of a little bit clunky, even though ultimately I think Simon and I would agree that was a more interesting story.
Look, I've heard of real life stories, people that I'm acquaintances with, have had to get divorces, during lockdown and separate houses during lockdown. They have kids. And then I've heard stories of affairs during lockdown and stuff like that. So, I mean, like you were actually touching on something very strange and real that I think we'll see like in dramas after this is over, when it's over, hopefully. And, just on that level for a second, I think it's important. The last stage of storytelling is editing. You cut out a lot of your movie, as you just said, and I'm a big Robert Altman fan. So I mean, this shortcuts version of Songbird is fascinating to me. Tell me some of the other threads and storylines that you cut out.
Yeah, I mean, the main one was in the original version. There was a character of a teenage girl who was homeless. Her parents had died during the pandemic, and she was living on the streets, and she witnessed the murder of the homeless guy that is now Peter Stormare's character kills a homeless guy before he goes into Sarah's apartment. There's a guy outside that he stabs to death. That's originally right. that was in a completely different place in Act 1 of the movie, where Harlan goes out on the streets and kills a homeless guy, and a homeless teenager is filming it with her phone, and he chases her, and then she goes to sleep in Lester, played by Craig Robinson, in the back area of his warehouse, and he stumbles across her while he's in his hazmat suit, and he has to make this really difficult decision of, shall I let her in and save her, or shall I let her perish out on the streets? And ultimately Lester lets her in, and for a while you don't know if Lester's a good guy or a bad guy, because he imprisons her by quarantining her in a child's bedroom that he has in his warehouse. And you wonder, why does he have this child's bedroom? And then as we move through Act 2 into Act 3, there's the realization that Lester used to have a wife and a daughter, and that they died during the pandemic, and he's kind of a broken man, and he basically finds redemption through this girl that he helps and saves, and they form a kind of family unit. And together, originally in Act 3, she was very much a part of helping Nico when they formed that kind of unit together with Dozer and Lester, and Nico trying to save Sarah together. She was very much a part of that. And that was like one huge piece of the movie that got cut.
And it was a great piece as well. I think the biggest not problem, but the challenge was always, once the ticking clock started of they're coming for Sarah, it became increasingly difficult to cut to the other storylines without losing momentum. And I think that was where those decisions came from primarily. But heartbreaking decisions, because we loved all of that stuff. I mean, that was literally my favorite storyline in the script.
And that is clean out. There's no trace of it. I mean, even your ending, he sends Lester a wristband, and Lester has this other person that would be there in your movie. So what? Lester has a choice of, does he, use his wristband to go somewhere, or does he have to secure one for her now?
Right. So,
theoretically, wouldn't Lester have his own wristband because he's the hookup guy?
Well, that was kind of the one thing he couldn't get, but in the narrative,
that was never in the script, was it? The wristband ending.
That was something we added in quite late on.
Okay, Lita, Sarah's relative who gets it that she's quarantining with, do you think that she got the virus just out of sheer curiosity how this version of COVID-23 works? Did she get the virus because somebody else in the building had it and it went through the ventilation because they were there earlier taking away a neighbor?
There was actually a storyline,
but we shot it.
Yeah, there was a storyline shot where she would sneak out to gossip with her neighbor and smoke weed, and it was another one of those things where it was a really cool scene, but it just made it seem like too easy to leave your house. And suddenly, if it's that easy to leave your house and gossip with your neighbor, why aren't more people breaking the rules, and why wouldn't Sarah break the rules? And it kind of undercut the rules of you stay in your house and your door stays shut.
The theory is you stay in your house, your door stays shut, not just because of a show of force, because there aren't armed guards outside of your house.
No, because
the fear of the virus.
Yeah, and it really undercut all of that stuff. And so then, I mean, it's sort of background stuff, but you notice on their floor of the apartment building, one of the doors has already been kind of condemned with caution tape.
Yeah, I saw that.
You see the neighbor get taken. And so the idea was, I mean, I think Harlan says at one point, it's amazing how often I have to come back to the same address. Once it's in the building, you're kind of in trouble. And
Harlan says there's been an outbreak of cases in your building. That was never in the original. That was never in the script that we shot. So, and all of the news footage, like you were saying about the virus being airborne and stuff, like when the news reporter says that in the movie, that was all stuff that we layered in later on to try and make sense of how Lita got sick, basically.
And it does make sense. I thought it made sense. So obviously with a time frame that short, you really can't do reshoots. Was there anything that you had to really challenge yourselves on during editing through ADR or something like that to get across?
Yeah, I would say so. That was one of the other great things Michael Bay brought to it, was he cast a light on all of the sort of bits that didn't quite make sense and forced Simon and I to come up with smart, efficient ways of getting story points across to the audience that we hadn't probably considered in the sprint to get into production. So every news clip you see in the movie has a narrative reason for being there, that it's explaining different things that were important.
Mr. Griffin is going to kill May at a certain point because he doesn't want his family exposed, and Dozer comes to the rescue with this drone that could blow his head off. What do you think was going through his mind to have that character go from just West Side house husband to killer with a gun ready to kill, because it's definitely a departure for what we've seen of the characters so far. But it was, interesting because your movie kind of went into, killer slasher film area in that
right.
respect.
I think that was all from the cutscene stuff, wasn't it, Simon? Like there was a lot more creepy William Griffin stuff. Like the original scene where he goes to see May had an almost kind of David Lynch vibe to it. It was very disturbing.
And Blue Velvet with his breathing mask, and
and he was clearly a very
Daddy's home. Where's my bourbon?
right. I mean, it was very much like that. The original scene was about 4 times as long and was genuinely disturbing.
Huh.
And ultimately, we just kind of pared it back, and it ended up being that he was really just a bit weird, but was having an affair and was super jealous of May. There was also a bunch of stuff where she originally met Dozer because he was watching her with the drone. So when William left, the drone was watching, and Dozer, you didn't know if he was like a stalker or not. And then he delivered some. The reason that May was a singer was that she didn't have any guitar strings, and she wasn't able to obviously go out and just buy any, and they were really hard to come by in this future world. So Dozer left some guitar strings on the hood of her car for her, with it, dropped them off with this drone, and that's how they started this relationship. And originally, William was aware of what was going on through her because she was live streaming. Oh fuck! Someone's got me some guitar strings. How sweet! That kind of started the seed of William being jealous in the original version. So that was, running through the entire narrative, as opposed to where it is now, where it kind of comes out of the blue.
Yeah, I mean, it made sense why the drone was there. At one point, May says that she's going to come to his house. Like he invites her over. Was there ever more to that, of the possibility of like those two characters coming together?
I think it was. Yeah, I think there was. That's definitely sort of truncated in the finished film, but there was definitely more of a kind of, is it a romance, or it never quite got there, but it was definitely sort of a sense that these two people kind of needed each other and had found each other in the weirdest of ways. I think
we wrote a scene where she turned up at his door, didn't we?
There was at one point she actually arrives at his house and they're going to like live together, but that almost felt like a bit too much of a step for that relationship. And
it broke our own rules. That why could Sarah and Nico just do that?
So
right, because neither one of them had immunity bracelets either. So that makes sense. I know we're starting to run out of time here, so I'm going to wrap it up in a minute or two. But the silliest thing, and I mean this in the nicest way, but it was just like it made me think for a second, was the Griffins maid Marie like goes home at the end, and it's this nice moment, and then I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, wait a minute, did the Griffins like kidnap and make this girl be their maid for 3 years, and this is the first time she's seen her husband, and they've now just released her? Like, what the hell was going on there? Maybe I'm off my rocker on this.
Well, no, we were quite fascinated by the fact that a lot of people kind of kept on their
nannies and so on.
The nannies and people that helped them out around their house in Beverly Hills and places like that. And we were kind of wondering, how does that work? And we were sort of taking that to its like extreme, I guess. But essentially that they had not kidnapped her, but I mean, people need to get paid and need a job. And she had it. I think there was a line at one point where Nico was sort of saying to Lester, like, this is so unfair. They've like imprisoned this woman. And Lester was like, she has a job. Like, most people are unemployed. Most people don't have anything. Like, she has a roof over her head and she has a job. And it was that kind of conflict of, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And ultimately she gets to go home. And
it was interesting. I mean, because it was good that you addressed that, because again, it was on the periphery, and it just made me think like, wait, was she kidnapped? It's good to hear she was not kidnapped, but you're right. She had a job. She kept it going. I know people that have both let nannies go and kept them. So I get it. Your toughest scene. So both of you as writers, starting with your toughest scene on the page and how you creatively reached the challenge. And then Adam, of course, your toughest scene as a director.
Gosh,
what was the scene you kept sweating, the scene you kept rewriting, the scene you kept struggling with over and over? And it could be different for each of you, but starting on the page.
I'd say more than just any scene, just the whole opening of the movie and trying to establish the world. I think that was the thing we probably came back to the most in terms of getting the information across about how different it is from now, but how similar. And that whole web of introducing everyone at the beginning and how are they connected or not connected yet, but are going to be, and what are the rules of the world that we had to get across so quickly. That in my memory anyway is what we came back to the most. and we're constantly sort of tinkering with and trying to figure out. I'm trying to think that specific scene wise. Other than that, I don't know if you've got anything, Adam. That
I mean, there were quite a few logic things that we just were constantly stressing about. Particularly, how did Grandma get sick was one of them, where we spent ages really worrying about that, and should we film the scene or not film it? And then if we don't film it, how the hell are we going to have it that she got sick? And then ultimately, it was just a throwaway line where Harlan says, "There's been an outbreak of the virus in your building," and it was as simple as that. But that was 3 months of Simon and I pulling our hair out trying to work out how did she get sick,
And then Adam, as a director, I mean, you're in multiple formats. You're doing a film under quarantine conditions. You're using GoPros. You're using iPhones. By the way, were those phones real in the movie? Those weird phones that had those sites?
Oh yeah. That was an LG new LG phone. Yeah,
I hadn't seen those, but anyhow. So Adam, what was your toughest scene as a director? The one logistically, or just the one thematically, acting wise, that was tough for you, and you needed to rise the challenge to get over it?
I mean, I wouldn't say any of it. I mean, some movies you just have luck, and some movies everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Like the last movie we made was one of those, I would say. Whereas this one, it became clear very early on that we sort of had luck on our side, and the shoot went relatively smoothly. But there was the fundamental fact that we had to do 12 pages a day, and we couldn't drop the ball. There was no possibility of really doing reshoots and that kind of thing. So just having the pressure of doing that kind of page count, and then compounding that with doing a movie during a lockdown, during a pandemic, and having to do 12 pages a day. And then the one misstep that I think I take responsibility for it really is that we thought that we were being really smart by having all of these cell phone conversations because it was a natural way to isolate people. But I'd never really thought about when you film a phone conversation in a movie, one page becomes 2 pages because you have to film both sides of the conversation. So you have to film each page twice. So suddenly I had a 146-page script, and I was actually having to film that times 2 because almost the entire film was done over cell phone conversations. And so I would just be pulling my hair out because I'd see a 12-page scene, and suddenly a 12-page scene would become a 12-page day would become an 18-page day, which is just ridiculous. I mean, no one does 18-page days. And every day became like that because there were so many phone conversations, and it'd be like, oh, fuck, we've got to do another fucking phone call with Sarah and Nico.
So did you start giving up on that? Did you sometimes cheat it of like, it's okay to hear them, we don't have to see them?
No, because I just knew that we would need to see both sides of the conversation. And I structured it because I knew the film would be so performance dependent that I didn't want to just do. I've done these kind of like social media-y type films before where you have an actor acting with a black screen on an iPhone, and it's really difficult to maintain believability. So I knew that with this movie, where it hinged on so many FaceTime conversations, for example, that I really wanted KJ to be able to act opposite Sophia and vice versa. So I would bring in the actors, and I would have them sitting in a building adjacent to where we were filming, and all those phone calls were done in real time. But we would have to film both sides of them. So when Doze is on the screen talking to May, like he was really on the screen talking to May, but then I had to refilm that scene all over again. And some of those scenes were like 6-page scenes. So I'd have to film May's side, and then I'd have to go and film Doze's side.
Wow.
And that became I won't do that again.
No phones in the next movie.
No phones. Yeah. I'm never having a phone in the movie again.
Was that always your ending? That the two of them get away? Was there a different ending that you ever considered?
Yeah, there was an extended ending where we saw them in Big Sur together.
Okay,
which was nice, and I wish we'd had the opportunity to film that. But I think that was always the ending, wasn't it, Simon?
Yeah, no, it was always that they did escape together. Yeah, we were really adamant we had to end on an optimistic note. Yeah.
Okay, well, wrapping it up, back on editing, was there anything when you were like, not in the editing room because you wouldn't be together, but when you were watching your cuts, you're like, damn it, if only I had this one shot. But you had to shoot everything so fast. Was there something, Adam, that you were just kind of wishing you had a shot of during editing that you just couldn't get?
Yeah, I guess the only thing was really the end of the movie, which to me, I still kind of cringe when I see it, just because the way we shot it, we were always going to have an extra day of bike shots where we would see them on the
motorcycle.
Bike, on the PCH, and on a whim, I was just like, maybe I should just film them on a green screen, just to have it, and I did. And then obviously that's what we ended up using. And I kind of kicked myself that I did that because otherwise we would have had to spend the extra money to go and film that. But because I'd shot it, everyone was like, oh, no, we've got it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And when I see it, I'm like, it's the last few shots of the movie. Like, we should have spent a bit of money there.
I mean, and you were using drones and you had aerial stuff going too. Some of it I know was stock footage, but like, yeah, it's still red. It was clear what they were doing.
I can't tell. I know it makes you cringe, but I can't really tell. Yeah.
Well, it's really just it's the close-ups of them with the helmets on and so on, which I suppose I would have probably had to film in that way anyway. But to me, it just looks a bit janky. That's all.
Well, so what's next? Are you guys going to pick back up with your Blumhouse film that was shut down? And what was the title of the film again?
Yeah, Luna. No, that ended up getting filmed a few months ago, so that's coming out. A different director directed it, and
really, so they took your film and they basically sent it to a foreign country where there isn't as stringent lockdown. Is that what happened?
No, they filmed it in LA.
Really recently.
Really recently.
A few weeks ago, I think, right?
Yeah, but I was tied up with Songbird, so I couldn't do it. So it was for. Yeah, there were a bunch. They did a series called Into the Dark for Hulu, which were standalone features, like horror features, a different one each month. And I did 2 of those last year, and then it was the final episode of the second season, which is the end of the whole run. And it was something I was really excited about. But I understand it was within a TV schedule, so they just as soon as they could, they had to film it. And I was trying to desperately make myself available, and I couldn't. So. It was just one of those things.
What's next? What's next for you guys? Have you been working on a new script in lockdown, or are you going to revive one of your old ones? What are you guys working on next?
Got a few things. We're working on a new spec at the moment, which we're excited about, and kind of trying to take a bit of a breather as well and think about what we want to do next. But I think we have some old scripts we've dug out as well that we want to kind of give a fresh look at, and so I think one of those, hopefully.
Yeah. It's such a weird time, though, isn't it? Because it's like the COVID thing's the elephant in the room. Like, when you're writing a script now, do you address COVID? Is it after it? Do the characters mention the fact that we've all just been through this crazy year? Or I don't know. Yeah, it's been so hectic for us this year, Simon and I, that Simon and I came up with the idea on the first day of lockdown, and now here we are talking to you, and we just finished the film and have gone straight into publicizing it. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's something why Queen's Gambit, right, on Netflix captivated so many people because it's a piece set in the 1950s. So you don't even have to talk about it or think about it.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you guys are thinking of your next project and that you're going to figure out what you do before COVID-23 hits. We're only on COVID-19 today, because then you'll get shut down for COVID-23 and 24 and whatever the hell else. Look, you guys have been very generous with your time. I can't wait to see what you do next. Adam and Simon, thanks for your time today.
Thanks you, Jeff. So much, Jeff. Great to meet you, man. Thank you so much.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to co-writer Simon Boys and co-writer-director Adam Mason for coming down to chat about their latest film, Songbird. And of course, this is a great time for you to support an independent film. So please go seek out Songbird and make sure to rent it, take a look at it, spread the word about it. That's what we're doing. We're helping each other out. And, these are independent filmmakers that really wanted to make a film during the pandemic, and they did, and they pulled it off. And it's a fascinating thing to see. And while you're surfing around online, there might be one more stop you could make, and that would be over at backstory.net to check out Backstory Magazine. You could also read us on a desktop, laptop, or via our iPad app, Backstory. While you're there, you could save $5 off a subscription using the code SAVE5. That's save and the number 5. You could use that at backstory.net, but your credentials will work on a desktop or laptop or our iPad app. But you have to go to the website to use the discount code. Look, if you've never read us, this is a great time to read our free issue. It really shows who we are. Being a subscriber gives you access to our archive, which now goes back to issue 30. We're just getting ready to release our new issue 42. It is packed full of tons of really cool stuff, some really rare scripts that you absolutely cannot read anywhere else in the world, along with interviews with those screenwriters. And of course, our usual interviews with filmmakers, showrunners, and comic book writers as well. So there's going to be a lot of great stuff in issue 42. And, we'll be advertising it on our site and telling you what's in it right as we publish. We're going to be publishing it right before the end of 2020. So you still have time. And, it would be great to get your support, my podcast listeners, for this, my passion project. It would mean a lot to me and our journalists and our editors, and of course, our very talented art director as well. So thanks for considering subscribing to Backstory Magazine. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2020. All rights reserved. If you want to find me online, you could find me on Twitter as Yo Goldsmith or as Backstory_mag. I have a Facebook fan page. I don't check it all that much, but I'm supposedly there as well. Obviously, I'm also on Instagram also as Yo Goldsmith and Backstory_mag, those two different accounts on Instagram. And I am looking to use Instagram a little more, because I think there's a lot of great art in our magazine that we're going to be tweeting out, kind of to tease people when we're getting ready to release that new issue, which is going to be fun. So you can always reach out to me there. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.